Hey folks, it's Mark Maron. What the freakers, what the funk buddies, what the friggineers? The show is WTF, but I won't say what the F stands for when the president's here. Gotta be on your best behavior when the medium goes legit. Maybe the F stands for feline. I've got 2 cats. My cats, neurotic and paranoia. Let's do this. Boomer lives. No, it's not WTF. It's AFW. A Few Words with Eric Santamaria is the name of the podcast. I am the long-suffering Eric Santamaria in question, and this is our 6th episode. We are now into the 2nd month of the podcast. I can't believe 5 episodes in have gone by so quickly. And once again, the feedback has been outstanding. I love hearing from all of you listeners. I want to hear your suggestions, your questions, maybe some ideas of what to do, what not to do. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer. And John White, I have gotten your questions, in this case, 2 MMA questions. But I'm recording this before I leave for Vegas, actually. By the time you hear it, it will be a couple days after UFC 200 in Vegas. So I went on a nice vacation out to Vegas for a few UFC cards, and of course the biggest event of all time, so I'm sure I'll talk about that in the future. So hold tight, John White. But if anybody else has questions, feedback, suggestions, criticism, whatever it might be, there's various ways you can get it to me. Email afwpod@gmail.com, Twitter @afewwords with ES, on Facebook, subscribe on SoundCloud or iTunes. If you enjoy the show, do all the liking, sharing, subscribing, following, whatever, all that social media stuff. You support the show, we'll keep it going. And before we dive into our conversation this week, I wanted to say a thank you to all the fans who have enjoyed and supported the show for the past month. I especially wanted to thank Gregory O'Daniel, longtime Wrestling Roundtable fan. He starts many great conversations in our Roundtable Facebook group. You're welcome to join us there. But he left a really wonderful review on iTunes. So thank you, Gregory, for your enjoying, your continued listening, and your 5 stars. I appreciate all of it. And someone else who does is one of my longtime best friends, Lawrence Haber. He joined me on the first episode, and now he is back for a one-on-one. We're going to talk about growing up a pro wrestling fan, how we met in high school, working together a little bit in pro wrestling itself, and music. Music is a big theme in his life, not just playing music, but engineering, recording, and we talked about creating his album Anxiety Log, which you've heard tracks from in the past month. We're going to dive into all that, so I hope you enjoy. I did some music too when I was younger. Maybe I'll use this as the new theme. How are you today?
I am well. I'm not good, I'm well.
Good, thanks. Now, if you learn how to spell your, I'll be happier. Glad to sit down with one of my best friends. Obviously, a lot of people know you from the Wrestling Roundtable on the internet, but you've been playing bass guitar in the New Jersey tri-state area for a really long time. Basically, pretty much ever since I've known you, so maybe people know you from there. But let's go, as Wolfman Jack would say, back into time. I think we met in 1997, was it? Do you remember?
97, yeah. I moved to Nalpin in April, I think, of 90, after Easter break, I think it was.
I think that's correct.
Or, you know, spring break, Easter break. And we met in art class.
Yes, art class.
And I made, I don't know what these things were called, but something with aluminum foil and paint. And I made a Howard Stern something or another. And that might have been in the other school I was in, but I had that. And so that was a connection that we had early on. We both were listening to Stern at that time. Classic Stern on terrestrial radio, as if there's alien radio.
Nah, Sirius to me, the early years especially with Artie, is the classic Stern. But the one thing I didn't like about the art class is that
we didn't knock the art class.
Yes, because I grew up an art student. I won many art awards. And what we couldn't do in the art class was original pictures.
No, it has to be a rigidly defined curriculum of specifically graded art.
Yes, we had to choose a picture or something else to recreate, and I didn't like that. I wanted to create my own things.
Well, you got to hone your skills first before you go off into your. You have to have some technique, I guess, was the point of that.
I had it already.
You did. You were advanced. I was not. And we hit it off because of an NWO shirt. Because right away, when you move into a new town, I moved a couple times as a kid. The first thing you look for are people who have common interests. And I felt when I moved, I could reinvent myself. My mom got me all these new clothes. I was like, that's what the cool kids are going to wear, so I'm going to wear that. But still, the authentic, real thing was, are there any other wrestling fans around that I could hit it off with? At the time, I was definitely a cool kid because I had two things. Wrestling and Magic the Gathering. So I was ready to be the most popular kid to reinvent myself in the school. And I found my friend Zach. Shout out to Zach. Through another mutual friend. I was like, yes, Zach, he went to a Magic tournament in Edison, New Jersey with me, so I'll be friends with him. We decided in math class. And then in art class, I saw this gentleman wearing an NWO shirt.
First one in Manalapan High School to wear an NWO shirt.
And it was well weathered at that point. It couldn't have been more than a few months old, and it had clearly been worn many times. You can't see his face right now, but it's the classic Eric look for all the Round Table fans. It's an icy gaze. But I think I just walked up to you and you didn't look too excited to make a new friend wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt and Boss jeans.
I didn't have many back then.
You didn't have many.
Still don't.
I was going to talk to this guy and make a friend. I must have just said NWO to you. Like that's hello, because I recognized the letters, and he probably thought, what a fool. And Eric actually... He hated WCW. The NWO wasn't an angle to him. It was a calling card. He was behind the mission. And so I thought, I was more of a smart fan than Eric at that time. I'm just saying. I've since taught him well, and he's exceeded my knowledge, and he's the professor now. Not Mike Tenay, it's Eric. But I did school him at the time, and I enlightened him to understand that the NWO is actually part of the actual WCW, and since you like them, you therefore like the company that it exists. So that's how we hit it off, and the rest is history.
Well, that influence was from your godfather, right, Uncle Howie?
Yeah, my family's originally from Brooklyn. Coney Island, if you ask my dad, very specific. You have to make that distinction. And I have a godfather. We call him Uncle Howie. And he read The Observer and was telling me about it when I was a kid. And so I was smartened up when I was really young. And wait, why did we make that point? Why am I saying that?
Because I remember... You let me borrow the best of Jushin Liger in Japan, obviously, the best of Ultimo Dragon.
We're OG smart fans.
Well, that was from Uncle Howie, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. He used to, allegedly, he used to get the DVDs, DVDs, oh my God, tapes, VHS tapes for the children out there. Liger, Ultimo Dragon.
That blew my mind when I saw that the first time.
I mean, and you got to understand, at this time, it's 97, we had AOL, but there was no Japan. You couldn't watch wrestling on the internet at the time. There was WWE.com.
But even if there were, that was more for older people. We were just getting exposed to AOL at the time. We didn't know.
I can't remember what was on either the Liger or the Dragon tapes, but the stuff was, to us, it was like another universe. And so from that day on, we were more sarcastic about it than we'd ever, and more jaded than we could. We got that very early on in life.
Well, how'd you get into wrestling in the first place?
My earliest memory, which is I can corroborate this memory with a photo, is of a Hulk Hogan poster in my room in Staten Island as a 4-year-old child with Hulk Hogan pajamas and the old Hulk Hogan rubber action figure from what were those? LJN or whatever it was. Yeah, the Iron Sheik one that everyone had, where I bit the Iron Sheik's little boot off, and I had Jimmy Hart. I had
you had the Road Warriors AWA.
Well,
figures?
whoa, hold on. We got to do the LJN first.
All right.
The other thing we had in my room was my dad had I guess bought some After mags and cut out some of the like one-page photos, and we had the Road Warriors, Sergeant Slaughter, and then he got these. I guess they were fake autograph pictures. I don't even know where he got them, but they had these WWF glossy photographs with they were signed, and who knows? Maybe maybe at the time they were real. Maybe Coco Beware was sitting there signing every one of these 8x10s or whatever. And I had a bunch of them. I had them in a binder. I had Slaughter. I had Macho Man and Elizabeth, old school with the pink tights with the stars. We're talking '86 here for all you kids. I had a ton of Hogan stuff. I was indoctrinated at a very young age with that. Tito Santana. I had a Tito Santana picture. So I had all this stuff, and I was a kid in New York in the 80s, and it was He-Man, it was the Mets, and it was wrestling. Those were the three things. And music, which we'll talk about. That was the nighttime thing with its little black and white TV in my room. I had a good diet of 80s music videos, which I guess we'll talk about that later. But my earliest memories of watching it are really my taping Saturday Night's Main Event in like 86. Everything that happens in your world in general is like the definitive version of that thing. So at the time, the main event of the first Saturday Night's Main Event tape I had was Hulk Hogan and Andre versus King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd. And to me, that meant that these were the four biggest stars in the world. And I guess kind of at that time, it was probably between WrestleMania 1 and 2 that they did that angle on Saturday Night's Main Event.
I thought Hulk Hogan had to be the strongest human being in the world because he body slammed
Absolutely.
Andre the Giant.
And so I had a bunch of those Saturday Night's Main Events on tape. My dad taped them for me. The Halloween episode, which you've probably all seen or heard about this, of Saturday Night's Main Event, where it's all of those classic 80s guys, Macho Man, Piper,
Ventura,
and they're all dressed up in these ridiculous costumes, bobbing for apples. And the stuff like totally holds up. I like the physicality of it. I knew it was fake very young. I figured that out, but I didn't care. To me, it was like a show, like a TV show, theater. It was just something I enjoyed watching. And the personalities, they had Roddy Piper. They went to Roddy Piper's house to trick or treat, and I just remember him. He did the one coconut, two coconut. And rest in peace, Roddy Piper. He was taking these bricks. They were tinfoil bricks, so they were candy bars. And then he took bowling balls and he put like a stick through it, and they were candy apples. And he took the candy apple bowling ball, he dropped it in the kid's bag, and the bag broke when all the candy came out. And I just remember Piper as a kid just going like, "I had one for you," and I got, "Oh, look at these, it's a candy bar for you."
And that's what people hated about Vince McMahon's WWF in the 80s. Good. They turned it into a sketch show practically.
But I like that just as much as like Hogan and Bundy and the Cage.
I mean, the older fans, yeah.
Like they had the build-up where Bundy avalanched Hogan, and I guess that was Bundy's push at the time. He was going to be the top heel, and they had the blue cage. And so I guess WrestleMania 2 is like my first WrestleMania memory. That's going back. A lot of people, I guess our age don't go that far back. So it was that bug. It was just my dad and my uncle. They took me to a show in Brooklyn that somehow their like lodge or something hosted, and I guess it was an indie show.
Yeah, an indie.
It might have even been the weekend of WrestleMania. That was like the first indie show tied to WrestleMania.
That started early on,
and
apparently.
I forget. I have to ask my dad who was on the show. It might have been like Johnny Rods. I think they talk about that. They don't really remember things well either. They're like carnies in their own way. My uncle and my father, so they might not know. And so yeah, 85. I went to my first show. And it just became something I followed on and off from there.
But more on than me,
I need to cut down on the coffee, Eric. I'm sorry. I'm very excited.
But you said on and off, and you watch... Well, you DVR every week, don't you? Now the 3 hours of Raw and fast forward.
It takes up so much space on my DVR. I need to start deleting that. They need to cut that down, don't they?
And you give me updates here and there, like they did this with Shane McMahon this week, and then they did this with Cesaro.
He gets the real-time text. He gets the text message, commentary or whatever.
Well, what's kept you even to this day checking it out? What is the appeal that makes you all these years later still want to give it a shot?
It's comforting. It reminds me of being a kid. That's such a good question. It's so hard to answer that. I don't really know, I would say. It's just like music. It's just something that's there, and it's in your environment, and you've known it since you were a kid. It's familiar. There's moments where it's really exciting, and it's always something to look forward to. Like, it doesn't end. That's what's weird about it. You have every year, it's a new big show, but the next night is the Raw after, and they do something, and even if it's terrible, it's there. It's like reliable or something. So much in society is disappointing. You get to the end of a show or the end of
MASH.
the run of whatever. Yeah, like I was watching the Cheers finale on Netflix. Of course, I go right to the finale once they upload it, and it made me so sad. I watched the first episode and I watched the last episode, and it was so sad to see the end of that show. And I think the ending of that show is depressing anyway. But the idea that wrestling is just like timeless or something, and there's such a crazy history to it. And you're a boy, you're a kid, you're aggressive, and sports can be pretty annoying. I mean, I'm a reasonably big sports fan. In the 80s, I grew up a Mets fan, but I was just as much a Hulkamaniac as I was a Mets fan. It disappoints you because stupid stuff happens in sports. It's not.
I don't know. It's all unfamiliar to me.
He thinks that there's innings in hockey, but you just don't. You get to the end and it's so disappointing and bitter, and it could take 20 years to win a championship, and that's fine. That's part of it. It never ends. But at the same time,
just like Japan,
you don't get what you get in movies and what you get in television, when movies and television are good, where you actually get resolutions and outcomes, and you're not disappointed. I mean, you're disappointed if you're into it as a smart fan, because all these people are dying and there's all this horrible stuff happening, and if you know the ins and outs, who's not getting pushed and all that kind of thing. But they know, WWE and all these other companies know that they can make these moments, that they can actually give you that Shakespearean tragedy, and they can give you that Spielbergian Disney happy moment if they get it right. And other things don't offer that a lot in life, and you can go see it live. The most important thing, honestly, I met so many friends through it. And it's so cool when we can get together to watch a show. It's just bizarre that we may not see each other for a year, and here's this mutual thing that some of us might be watching every week or not watching at all. And we put a show on, and there's just immediately stuff to talk about and jokes to make, and it dovetails into conversations about other things in life that have nothing to do with it.
That's the big through line between, I think, most of our circle. If you want to call us the round table, but it's basically a lot of the same faces. Our circle of friends is the common thread that brought us together at the beginning anyway, was wrestling.
Absolutely. It was a common thread, and it's something to always go back to. And sometimes Eric and I actually we may get angry in a conversation because why are we just talking about wrestling? We talk about other things, but it's what we do. It's something interesting to talk about, and we enjoy it. So I think that kind of is why I still watch. And I mean, there's a lot of that comfort of something, the memories. You go back and a childhood memory, it makes your heart warm when you remember Macho Man and Warrior, which is my favorite match of all time.
Which one? The WrestleMania 7?
WrestleMania 7, yeah. The whole thing with Elizabeth and Sherry and the whole angle and just the way it was laid out. And I mean, that reminds me of being, I guess, I don't know, how old was I? I don't know, 10 or 11 years old or something. And it just takes me right back. It seems like it's happening now, especially with the network and the HD. Like music does. It immediately, you hear a song and you're like, I just heard 1999 by Prince. You go right there. It's the weirdest thing. Your brain just starts having the sensations, the smells, the textures. They're real.
It's imprinted on you.
It's imprinted, no doubt.
I mean, I remember for that match in particular, my parents weren't wrestling fans really, but they would kind of pop their head in every once in a while. My mother thought Bobby Heenan was hilarious, for instance. I mean, how could you not?
Yeah.
But I remember that one. I remember she said when we ordered it on pay-per-view, something like, call me downstairs when the Macho Man Warrior match is on. They were actually interested in this.
Yeah, it's my dad was into it. My uncle more so with the smart stuff. He knew the ins and outs. My dad was more like, I love Ric Flair, and all that kind of thing. But once I knew about it, I wanted to explore it more, and so I would get the After Mags and WWE Magazine and start. When I got sick, I would stay home from school or played hooky. There was a pharmacy in town. Wrestling and pharmacies never go well together, but there was a pharmacy in town that was also a video store. Remember video stores like Blockbuster? And I would rent tapes, and they had NWA stuff, and I had heard of Ric Flair. and the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express, and I rented like Best of Starcade, and seeing Tony Schiavone with a mustache, and seeing all Magnum TA. I was introduced to that stuff, and of course, like none of the kids in New Jersey knew NWA stuff in like 1990. I explored it through that, and also I watched WCW Saturday Night in like 1990. I remember the Juicer. Another
It was Art Bar,
Art
right?
Bar, yeah, and Sting and the Steiners. I think the first pay-per-view I ever like forced my parents to buy instead of watching it Scramble Vision was the first Super Brawl, which was like Sting and Luger versus the Steiners, which was like the biggest deal. They're two, good guys.
91, I think it was.
Yeah, and then I think it was Flair and Tetsuji Fujinami in the main event. I remember like trying to sell this to my parents, like, no, but Ric Flair, he's fighting a Tetsuji Fujinami. I had no idea who that was, but I was like, it's going to be cool because it's two champions from two different places. And then, of course, for me, I just wanted to see Sting and Luger as a team like win the tag titles from the Steiners. And it had like that show had the debut of Oz, Kevin Nash, which was a great day, and the debut of the Diamond Stud. So it's a fairly significant show that has nothing to do with the WWE. Imagine that.
Well, you got into ECW pretty early on too.
Yeah. I remember my uncle Howie telling me, like, from Brooklyn, Brooklyn, you gotta watch the CCW. It's unbelievable. It's so good. Paulie is doing a great, and I'm like, 11,
Tommy
12.
Dreamer.
Tommy Dreamer, the Salmon, his entrance. I had MSG. Not the chemical they put in the food.
The network based on the arena.
I don't know who's listening. And they had ECW on Sundays at 1 a.m., which isn't ideal for a kid in 7th grade.
Was it one or two?
I think it was one.
Yeah,
and it was on after Rangers hockey. So like the Rangers were in the playoffs, the Knicks were in the playoffs, and ECW was on at 1 a.m. It was like the perfect time to be a kid into all those things. I would tape it and I'd watch it like right before school the next day. I keep saying I'm an OG wrestling fan. ECW, like Rodney, I bust him on this all the time because he watched with like Rob Van Dam and Sabu. I was watching back with like Hack Myers and JT Smith, the
Scorpio,
Sandman, Tuco Scorpio, Taz when he was Tasmaniac, and then when he became.
You realize we've degenerated into the typical wrestling podcast where the wrestlers talk about who was on the roster at the time, and they just rattle off a list. Like, how was it in Florida Championship Wrestling? Oh, Buzz Sawyer was there, Dusty Rhodes, Kevin Sullivan.
When people say, oh, it was the grunge of wrestling, like grunge music, it really was. At that time, I'm a teenager. I'm listening to Pearl Jam and Nirvana and all that, Soundgarden, all that kind of stuff, and hip hop, Dr. Dre. So all this kind of, I guess, countercultural kind of stuff with an edge to it, not so pop music, and I'm kind of rebelling in my own suburban way. And here's this wrestling company that's rebelling against the clowns on WWE and the WCW political structure. And so for me, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get behind this. I mean, wrestling is countercultural as it is, but now I'm really deep. I'm the counterculture to that. The music, I mean, White Zombie in the opening theme, and 9 Inch Nails, and the Sandman's entrance. To this day, like it's so much of that has been taken down because it's got Metallica in it, and Paulie wasn't exactly an artist rights person at the time. He didn't know, and
I think he knew and just flew under the radar on purpose.
Okay.
Like, let's skip by as best we can.
That combination of the music and the environment, it really spoke to me. And at the same time, Nitro was on, and the NWO, and we actually went to a show in Philly, which was one of that show in that arena. It was about 110 degrees. There was a Taipei death match where I think I was hit by broken glass with some.
Was that the Rottens?
It was the Rottens, and Sandman versus Cactus Jack was the main event. I mean, this is Cactus Jack. He came out to Born to Be Wild, and it was
this is King of the Death Match.
Yeah,
Cactus
and you
Jack.
couldn't even tell who the good guys and bad guys were. Like it was at the time, it was cutting edge. Like now it might come off a little bit, passe, but at the time, like this stuff was like crazy. And I remember showing my friends this stuff, and they were watching a couple years later when the the Attitude Era was happening. They were into Austin, and I was like, you gotta watch this. And at that time, it was like Rob Van Dam and Sabu. And they were like, I can't, this is real. Like, what is going on here? These guys are flipping and going through tables, and people are like cursing. It was for a kid, who's a teenager. This is you wanted to wear the T-shirt. You were proud of. You thought it was cool, and it wasn't. No.
Well, this is the height of the Attitude Era at this point. We were in high school. I wasn't really liking the turn that wrestling was taking per se. I liked it at first, but I thought it went way overboard at some point. Mm-hmm. And I think you felt similarly. Yeah. This was getting away from wrestling's traditional roots, and it fizzled out really quick in terms of its mainstream popularity.
Yeah, it was really a year-ish, really not even in terms of people like in school wearing T-shirts. Like there were a lot of kids that you wouldn't think would wear an Austin or a Rock T-shirt.
Goldberg.
Wolfpack.
Yeah.
And to see that stuff in school during like the Abercrombie and Fitch era or whatever, it was like, wow, that kid's wearing an NWO shirt. That's okay with the Jinko jeans and the Vans sneakers. It was cool because me and Eric were like, we wanted to own it. We were like, no, we were wrestling fans. You're fake. But at the same time, it was kind of cool to see. There was one kid. Come on, Eric, what am I going to say? Austin. And I think every day he wore the Stone Cold, the blue skull, Austin 316, like every day. He was just some kid, and he was like a year or two younger than me and Eric. Would just, in our mind, all he did was go, Austin. Like, he just loved Austin, so we called him Austin. And we would just, see him and just do that. And kid probably had no idea what we were doing. He might have even given us, like, a happy nod and not realize we're just making fun of him, which was so wrong.
Compared to now, because we've talked about that tons on the round table, which people can still listen to, but I'm not a fan of the way things are now, but at least back then it was much more interesting as opposed to banal and boring that I find it generally now. You might have a different take on it because you watch it more than me, but
has its moments.
How did you feel about me getting involved with Ring of Honor once that happened?
I like when people are able to in some way be connected to the thing they love as like a job. That's the best I could say. Just the idea, or even when you were training, you trained.
Well, what were your impressions of the Ring of Honor product?
Ring of Honor was a cool kind of like, in my opinion, a more for that period, I guess the 2000s, like for ECW, like a good evolution of that to be more about like going back to the old wrestling, and they were shaking hands for a while doing like respect stuff, I recall.
Yeah, it was a response.
And they had like all the new indie talent. Christopher Daniels and Brian Danielson and Cesaro or Claudio Castagnoli and all these guys. I didn't watch a ton of it because that was one of those periods where I was like I was still into wrestling, but I wasn't following that way. And I think at that time, like I was so invested in ECW and then that went away. And then I was so invested in WCW and that went away. I was like, I don't want to get too into this because I don't want to get hurt again. It's not going to end well. Yeah. Which is funny because the point I made before is how wrestling's like the old reliable thing. Maybe that's just WWE when all is said and done.
Well, I ended up using some of your music for different video packages, DVDs. How did you feel about that?
Oh, it was so cool. I mean, there was one with Colt Cabana and Homicide, maybe it was, I think. There was some storyline where like there was...
Jimmy Jacobs.
Oh, yeah. And it was some like kind of, dramatic music thing. And it was a video package about the feud, and I was like seeing music I had composed and recorded in that context was cool because like music and wrestling is like those things are hand in hand. You don't have WWE. You really probably don't have pro wrestling the way that it is now without music, without those entrance themes and those videos. It just doesn't. Can you imagine it? The music and wrestling. Every wrestling fan's a music fan. As soon as the music hits and somebody you know and love, it's instantaneous emotional, jubilation.
It's funny you see now WWE putting out workout and nutrition DVDs and things like that. I thought they should have been doing that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I also am surprised, especially with all the WWF, the music volume 5 and whatever, that there was never a touring concert of bands doing Jim Johnston songs. Like they put out the rap version and the metal, different versions of the song. I'm surprised there was never a concert series. Like, could you imagine Motorhead doing The Game?
That would be cool, but I think even cooler would be incorporating more live bands and entrances into the shows. I mean, they haven't done it much recently, but when like Motorhead played Triple H in, and I mean, even Limp Bizkit, it adds to it to have live music. The audiences might be different. Maybe there's a little overlap, but I think
Everybody listens to music.
It's exciting. You have to incorporate it correctly, though. Like if you just throw Kid Rock out there for 20 minutes and he's just doing the greatest hits medley, it's lame and it's not authentic and people boo. I mean, he's cool, but that just didn't work.
It was not the right
but,
setting
like
or time.
Snoop Dogg and Sasha Banks this year, man, I had my stereo up full blast. That's a perfect way to incorporate because it has a concert atmosphere in the wrestling environment. It works out well when done well. But yeah, that the idea of a touring thing could work.
How many people listening to this do you think heard when we did commentary for one Ring of Honor match?
2, me and you. Yeah.
Do you remember how that came about?
Oh, I don't. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll tell you what happened was I recorded some show. I think the main event might have been Aries defending the title against Delirious or something.
Okay.
I think it was that show. But I had recorded Dave Prazak and Chris Hero doing commentary for the show. And when I was transferring the files somewhere, somehow the first match got deleted completely. And I mean the commentary.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, no, what do we do? I couldn't recover it. And what are we going to schedule Chris Hero and Prazak to fly out so we can record one match? So I was like, hey, Lawrence, you want to record a match? It was Kevin Steen, who's Kevin Owens now, versus Roderick Strong.
Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah.
I didn't remember. I'll have to dig this up and watch it again. I think I have it somewhere.
Yeah, I think you do. Yeah, I didn't tell anybody.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
So it just went out, got duplicated and shipped and sold and everything. But you and I did commentary for one match. I think I started it off by saying, like, Dave Prazak and Chris Hero are running late, so we're going to fill in for them or whatever. But hey, we did commentary for one match that was released.
Yeah, I mean that's always been a dream to be a wrestling commentator, and it's a lost art, I think, in the wrestling business. And there's a few people doing it well. You know, I know I like Corey Graves. I think he's doing a good job and can develop. I like Tom Phillips and Mauro Ranallo now. This guy's he's like the real deal. When those guys are not, they're produced a little bit to be within the structure of what needs to be said and done, but are allowed to speak like people and speak from experience. It's great. Like it's such a difference when those guys get to do their thing.
You want to talk a little bit about Pro Wrestling Respect?
Wow, to be involved in the production of a show. My dad and I did the sound and the music, and I remember like all the wrestlers coming up to me and giving me like the CDs of their entrance music, and everybody like shook my hand, and it was so nice. Everybody was so nice. Like it's what I remember. Like everybody was just a team, and they were setting up the ring together, and it was just really, really cool to see people working together. We worked with some of the Roundtable guys.
Most of the Roundtable
guys.
Most
Roundtable guys, and we were doing, I think we did all the production, camera and everything like that. And Delirious was a super, super friendly, great guy. What a nice guy. And worked with you on it, and they couldn't thank us enough for helping out the cause, and the fans were great. That was a really cool experience. We were in an armory. It was old school. We were in an armory putting on a wrestling show, and I got to be backstage, and it was so funny because here I am loading in like speakers, which is what I do in my life as a musician, like kind of gigging, and not the wrestling gigging, the gigging, whatever.
You weren't cutting yourself with a razor blade hidden in your wrist tape?
That wouldn't have gone well in the old armory. And I'm like doing that, and me and my dad are like carrying bags and banging into stuff, and I'm like schlepping in. I'm like, I gotta do this gig. It's a gig to me. And then I see the wrestlers like warming up, and I'm like, this is funny because this is like these two worlds kind of crossing, like Eric's world of like the wrestling and the backstage, and people doing like Hindu squats and near like a deli stand, and here I am bringing in my speakers and stuff. So I'm glad to have done that and been a part of that. It's something I forget is a cool little credit to have to say I did that.
For sure, because it really was Delirious and I bringing our crews together. His students, my roundtable fans, friends, and we were working on everything as a collaborative process together. And to this day, to think about you doing the music with your dad, Rodney doing the backstage camera, Chris ringing the bell, whatever it is, just to think that we ran a wrestling show.
And it was, I got to remember to say this too, it's so intense. Like you can't mess up. Like if you play the wrong song, it's imagine watching Raw and like, here comes Cesaro, but he comes out to Dolph Ziggler's theme or something. You got to get it. You got to hit it right. People notice. Oh man, do people notice? I notice. You notice. So I remember Eric, he was ring announcing and also cueing us, and I thought we did a good job. But I mean, I was on pins and needles the whole time. Feedback on the microphones and batteries and
hoping they don't smash the mic.
All this stuff. Yeah, you're watching people like, please, that's the only mic we have. Don't throw it on the ground. But everybody was respectful, and everybody was nice and professional, and I'm pleased with the results, and more importantly, was very grateful to be a part of it. And I thank Eric here on this show for giving me that opportunity, and also to do music. When I got to do music for a variety of different projects, I was able to have my music played in some cool public places thanks to Eric. The Roundtable theme included.
Jeremy Losi, our fan, did the metal cover of it.
That's right. Somebody did do a metal cover of that.
Which I used on the Undertaker episode.
Okay, cool.
We'll get into your music in a moment.
Okay.
It's just funny when you said the wrestlers handing you CDs. I remember maybe from the next show on, the second show, that I was giving you the CDs, because the big thing was this is a kid-friendly show. This is a PG show, so no cursing, nothing violent like that.
Yeah.
And then they give you these entrance themes that have cursing in it and this and that. And then I made edits on the computer.
Yeah.
And, all right, here's the CD. I put it in order, so nothing to think about.
And
no
now,
problem.
it's only like 6-7 years ago, but now we just like make a playlist in iTunes and be done in a day,
Right.
But back then it was still CDs and I guess these guys traveled with their CD, and they went from show to show. Like, here's my music.
Right.
Can you imagine like John Cena showing up and like, here's my CD of
Basic thugonomics.
Yeah.
But the thing that we keep bringing up is your music. And like I said, ever since I've known you, you've been musically oriented. I think when we first met, you were DJing with your dad a lot. When did you start playing bass?
When I was maybe 15 or 16, probably like 15. So let's say 1998. And my friend, what happened was I was a hardcore Magic the Gathering player. Again, the coolest kid in school. And my Magic the Gathering friends, my good friend Jeff, who I haven't spoken to in years, and want to shout out, Jeff, if you're out there, you know where to find me. Say hello. Jeff bought a guitar, so the segue now was from Magic the Gathering to I guess being in a band. And I met some other friends in school. My old friend Seth and Jay, drummer and guitar player, or guitar player and drummer respectively, and we put a band together. I learned bass. What happened was my father said, hey, if you're going to play bass, I want you to go to the best teacher. And so this wonderful teacher named Joe McCarrow in Milltown, New Jersey. If you ever want to learn the bass, electric or upright, classical, jazz, funk, you name it, he's the guru. And
how'd you end up with bass as opposed to lead guitar?
Well, Jeff was playing guitar, so they needed a bass player. That's the story usually. That's the cliche is every bass player was a guitar player, or a band needed a bass player.
Because you can play guitar.
Yes, I can play guitar.
And you're doing upright bass now.
Upright bass, I've been doing that for a while, for about 10 years. And I don't know. It's just, that's the instrument. I really don't remember how it ended up being the electric bass. And I remember like we put it on layaway at Freehold Music, and I finally got it. And it's a cheap Ibanez P bass for those who know that's about gear. I still have it, believe it or not. And it's actually a really nice instrument. We formed I was very into Pink Floyd at the time, was my band of choice, which Eric has since gotten into.
Thanks
so
to you.
Of course, the first thing I did was learn to play Money on bass, which is in 7/4, so it's not an easy song in duple meter for the musicians out there. And we started a band called Prism, named probably, yes, deliberately after the cover of Dark Side of the Moon.
The first of many, because before we were about to sit down here, I told you I made a list of all the bands that I kind of remember you in.
Oh, boy.
You'd maybe be able to
Here we go.
fill in the gaps. You just started it off with Prism, Saturday Night Fever.
Yes, that's a big cover band. Yeah.
Blue Shift.
Oh, my God.
The Utes, the Lawrence Marshall Band.
Yeah.
Fireside Chat.
Yeah, Fireside Chat.
Threesome. Neil and the Diamonds.
Oh my God, this is memory lane.
Steeler and the Law.
Yeah, Steeler and the Law.
And now Funk Force 5?
Funk Point 5.
Funk Point 5.
I like Funk Force 5 though. That sounds like a Netflix show, like
Funk
a Marvel
Point
show.
5.
Yeah.
I heard you play last night at Huddy's Inn in Colts Neck. And
Yes.
You sound great.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, What happened was I realized that people like to hear covers of other people's music a lot. Or let's put it this way: a bass player can get a lot of gigs if he's versatile. When you play bass, it's a type of instrument where it's kind of always fun if you're with good musicians, because laying down a bass line on your own music or someone else's original music, or a cover band or a wedding band thing, it's all the same, because it's just you're playing. It's funky. You're laying down the foundation. So it's always artistic and always creative. I think sometimes a lot of like guitar players, maybe singers, they're like, why do I have to play this other stuff? I want to do my own stuff. I want to solo, which is cool. But so I never made a distinction like this is a cover band, this is an original band. I just like to play. I love playing. I'm gonna be in original bands like at the time when I was a kid. Prism and other bands after that. Blue Shift you mentioned. Wow, that's...
When did you segue from more DJing into the playing?
I was doing DJing, like wedding DJing and stuff like that, but I wanted to play. I always was a lover of music, and I would always play, doing like wedding gigs and stuff, other people's music, and I loved mixing songs, and I even had turntables. My dad had turntables, so I learned to beat mix, so I had a good sense of rhythm and time, which is great for a bass player, even though I knew nothing about notes or anything. And then when I started studying with Joe and learning electric, and he introduced me, he was and still is a professional bass player in like wedding bands and cover bands and things like that, and takes it very seriously and professionally, and reads music and learns the songs exactly as they go. He transcribes the bass parts exactly. I realized I want to do that, and the way to get out there and play for people, which is the best feeling to be in front of people, is to probably get involved with a cover band thing. Somebody told me this on a bus in college between classes, and this was a person I was going to school with. I don't think I've ever told you this.
You were at Rutgers at the time?
Rutgers time. I'm a Rutgers boy. Didn't go to school for music. Went to school for communication, not communications. At Rutgers, it's communication, the art of communicating,
singular,
or the discipline of communication, not internet technology. And I'm on a bus, and I think this friend of mine spoke Spanish and was interested in biology or something. And he said, I always believe that if you put two things that you love together, even if they're completely different, you can find yourself a career. You can make a career that's unique to you. And so for me, it was playing parties and the DJing and all that, and then also music, perform music, playing bass. So I said I can, have like a cover band or wedding band thing while I'm doing my original stuff, other points in time, and teaching and things like that. And so I started, a cover band, and then became a wedding band, and then I kind of retired that after a while because it got, a little burdensome, like the round table was for you to be a leader. I wanted to just play. And I had a tremendous run, and I'm very grateful for playing with this band called Saturday Night Fever, later The Fever. They were the great agency, and we played every weekend from 2000. I was with them from 2000 and 2005 to 2013 when they kind of disbanded. And the guy that preceded me is John J.D. DeServio, who is the bass player for Zakk Wylde's Black Label Society. So this metal band, and J.D. is this amazing bass player, funk bass player, jazz bass player, and also a metal dude. I hit him up on Instagram, and I know he plays with some people I know. JD's a good dude. I'd like to go out and see him. But he's the guy that preceded me, so it was like walking into this chair, someone else's gig, and this is this great cover band. And my buddy Mikey V, who Eric knows, great guitar player. He was like kind of the band leader, I guess. And the drummer was this dude, Richie Monica Jr., who played with Tantric, I think, and plays with the Billy Hector Band, which is a local kind of blues legend. And so these are amazing players. Like, I got no right being on stage with them at this time. I'm very much an amateur bass player who can kind of feel his way through stuff in his own way. Early 20s, I was. And through that, Mike gave me a chance to join his band. And I met amazing, like the connections, the networking of just being on this gig and then learning as I went, getting advice from people, and then branching out into meeting other people and then getting other projects through those people was amazing. Like just Rich, I wrote him a letter. I never sent it to him after he left that band, but he would give me advice. I mean, he taught me so much. He said things to me like, he's a drummer. He said, music has no friends. He said, music is something that brings people together. It's a friendship. It's a relationship with people, obviously. But in and of itself, you have to serve it. You have to make it quality and believe in it. And like it. So if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing up there as a bass player, if you're not listening, music doesn't have friends. You got to get it right. We can be friends, but music is not your friend. I remember one time we were playing a song, and he goes, I said to him, I'll just listen to you on this song, which is what you're always supposed to do when you're a bass player working drummer. And he goes, yeah, what a novel idea. To me, this was a watershed moment, but to him, that's what you're supposed to do. And so he really kind of got me to get my act together a little bit. And it made me want to study. And even though I didn't go to school formally for music, I took a lot of music classes. I was studying with Joe. And eventually I said, I need to do this the right way. I need to learn to read music. I need to learn theory, jazz theory. I need to play a little classical. So I got an upright bass, and I started studying classical technique with the bow. And I got into a lot of music I'd never listened to before, a lot of like jazz and fusion and classical, got a little into Bach, and got a lot into the jazz world, like Miles Davis and John Coltrane. And I started learning what they were doing. I got the Charlie Parker Omni book, which is a for bebop, the jazz language of bebop is the Bible. You learn how to all these musical phrases that are kind of the basic for improvising, a jumping off point, and you learn to read. And so I had that book, and then Joe got me into James Jamerson, the bass player from Motown, and I got the Standing in the Shadows of Motown, which is like the book you get to learn all the Motown bass lines, and I got into him, and I became kind of a professional bass player, and I guess to this day I still am. I went on a long time there. I'm sorry,
it's
I'm
good.
rambling.
We want to hear, because I remember doing a lot of gigs with you. I would assist your dad and you DJing sometimes, and
Eric
I
would help out.
Yeah, I would do the videography.
Yeah,
not just with you two, but with other DJs that worked for your dad. I remember we did a wedding at the Camden Aquarium, and I love animals. So when I had the chance to walk around and look at the sharks and everything, that was really cool for me. And I remember we did a wedding where down the road, do you remember we were across from, I want to say, Shea Stadium when Bruce Springsteen was there?
Wow.
Something like that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. It was a gig at like Giant Stadium.
Giant Stadium.
I got to stop you because I got to say my father is like, my mom too. I actually talked to my mom because she came to the gig last night, and people say, boy, you must be from a family of musicians. I say, if you heard my mom sing, your ass would shatter. But she can dance. My mom will dance all night long, and that's just as musical as singing or playing an instrument. And my dad, though, like as far as music, oh man, the influence there, he as a wedding entertainer guy, DJ and all that stuff. When I was a kid, we drive around and he would make mixtapes of like 70s stuff that him and my mom listened to in the clubs, like Donna Summer and Tavares and the Tramps and all these great disco groups, stuff that you don't listen to when you're like a kid growing up in the 90s. But he also I would have. He gave me he made a tape of The Who on Channel 5 with they did Tommy Live, and it had it had Phil Collins and Elton John and Patti LaBelle and The Who. And so I was into The Who. I was into the Beatles. He had vinyl records and 45s of the Beatles doing You Say Hello Goodbye. You say yes, I say no. That's great singing from a musician right there. But so I'd listen to those as a kid. So all this just being immersed in music. And like I said earlier, to bring it back, when I was a kid, like a young kid, and with the wrestling stuff, the Hulk Hogan era of my life when I was 4, there was some music channel on TV. It was black and white TV.
MTV, back when they played music?
No, it was some UHF video channel, and they would play 5 videos, and it was Jump by Van Halen, Jump by the Pointer Sisters, Billie Jean.
Jump Around. Oh, no.
Yeah. 1999 by Prince. Hall & Oates. It was Maneater or Private Eyes. I think it was Maneater. And so that was my early musical stuff come from my parents being supportive, and my dad really telling me to study, and just having, not even formally saying do anything, practice, more just he loves music. To this day I'll go to his house and he's got a DVR loaded with stuff that they showed on Palladia and stuff that hey, you got to watch this tribute of
just James Brown.
Yeah,
tribute.
Look, there's a musical thing we could have a holiday Thanksgiving with the whole family, and nope, Lawrence, come in the basement, I want to show you a 2-second as if I haven't seen look, Earth, Wind and Fire was on something 3 years ago and I never deleted it, so I'm going to show it to you now. It's a bonding thing. So I'm grateful to my parents for that, and my dad in particular for that. I'm going to show you a 2-second as if I haven't seen
look at this David Bowie tribute on
Earth,
Showtime.
Wind and Fire was on something 3 years ago and I never deleted it, so I'm going to show it to you now. It's a bonding thing. things. So I'm grateful to my parents for that, and my dad in particular for that influence.
And you mentioned some of the names that you worked with, and it's a litany. I remember you mentioning when you ran into Beetlejuice and Mandy Patinkin at a different event.
Who's that? It's that second person. I don't know who that is.
Mandy Patinkin?
Yeah, who's that? I don't know who that is.
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Oh, okay. Wow. Oops, I should have known that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But just some of the names that you've run into.
We ran into REM. It's going to sound like much more than it is, but when you do like corporate events, weddings, you can run into famous people. And like Michael Stipe and REM had just finished taping Saturday Night Live, and we were doing a gig at what was then the Rainbow Room, and he was walking around. They were walking in the parking lot, and security was moving them out. We were in the loading dock, which is where all the musicians come in and the entertainers, and I'm so obnoxious as a 16-year-old kid. I actually yelled, Michael Stipe, shiny happy people. That's what I did. And I mean, I guess he smiled, but I probably could have made a better impression on him.
You got your picture a couple years ago, the other year with, who did Blurred Lines? I'm blanking.
Oh, Robin Thicke.
Yeah, you got your picture with Robin Thicke.
Yes, my friend. Oh man, my friend Justin and I, the piano player, we were doing a gig in Atlantic City, and he was playing in the room next to us. Again, these stories, they sound so good on the surface, then you get below and you realize how ridiculous they are. And so he had finished his performance. This is right before Blurred Lines came out, so he was still kind of known, but not like a huge pop star. And so he had a band with him and everything. And so we were playing like the B room, and he was in the A room, and the doors opened to the A room, and we're like, let's go in. And they said, who are you? He said, we're with the band, which technically was correct. And we got to meet Robin Thicke, and he was super, super cool.
You mentioned Pink Floyd before, who you turned me on to a few years ago. You've turned me on to a lot of musical greats, Stevie Wonder, things like that.
Oh, great.
Who are some of the ones that influenced you beyond that? I know you're a big Prince fan. You love the Beatles.
Michael Jackson all the way. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without Michael Jackson in the 80s. And I remember the Thriller video used to terrify me as a kid. But man, those grooves were so amazing and wonderful.
And everyone who knows me knows I love Michael Jackson.
Eric does.
To give you an idea, every time we talk about music, Lawrence has to put it in this context, like we always refer to wrestling.
Yes.
It's like Michael Jackson. I'm like, I know. There's other things I like besides Michael Jackson, but it's like when Michael Jackson...
It's when Michael Jackson did this thing, Eric, I'm at this restaurant, and it's like this place, it's kind of like Michael Jackson, Madonna in the 80s. I mean, Like a Prayer, that video and that song and the bass line. Guy Pratt, great bass player. A lot of people don't know him. He just his bass playing on that. He played on both Michael Jackson and Madonna records. I think he played on a lot of Dangerous. Whew, what a player. And he's a big influence on me. The 90s I was a big Pearl Jam fan. My friend Seth was like a diehard Pearl Jam guy, so I got into the Alice in Chains, amazing songwriters and harmonies. Soundgarden. My wife loves Chris Cornell, right, Melissa? It's him and Freddie Mercury. Those are her two favorite singers, and they're the best front people, man. I love Queen. Oh man, just all those grooves. They're like, they are like, to me, the ultimate fusion, because you've got funk, like Another One Bites the Dust. You've got classical influence. You've got the layering of like Bohemian Rhapsody. It was done on like, I don't know, 4 or 6 tracks, and they just layered all of this stuff. It's ridiculous.
And just the great voice.
Oh, and his voice as a frontman. Freddie Mercury is the guy. I'm going to steal my wife's thunder on that because she sings his praises. Look up Bowie and Freddie Mercury doing... oh my God, that song is escaping me. Doing Pressure. Yeah. Which is one of the greatest bass lines ever written. Just ask Vanilla Ice. Yeah. And it's just the two of them a cappella recording that. And it's the harmonies and the way, their tone and how unique they are. And now they're like just two spirits, But they're still, this is why I love music.
Lives forever.
They're there. They're in the room. I had it on my stereo, and I just had this feeling. Led Zeppelin. And the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, especially when I was a kid, I had the vinyl of Zeppelin 4, which is Stairway to Heaven and Black Dog and all that stuff. And man, just hearing that on vinyl and like how Jimmy Page, like, I always say, he's the best sloppy guitar player ever, but as a producer, I think his instrument was Led Zeppelin. The way that he produced these things and put these things together, and John Bonham's drumming, and John Paul Jones, I realized recently, he's one of my biggest influences as a bass player. And The Who. John Entwistle was my first bass hero. I'm very proud. I have a picture he drew of the 4 original Who members, and then he signed it. It was like an original John Entwistle artwork, just like your artwork, kind of cartoon versions of the band, and but his aggressive style, like on songs like 515, on Quadrophenia and The Real Me, it struck a chord. Black Sabbath, I love Black Sabbath as a kid. Metallica, man, just that's a wrestling bridge right there, because the Enter Sandman, I got that album, the Black Album, the same time that I was into ECW, so it was like I'm on my bicycle, driving around when I lived in Sayreville, New Jersey, like with my Sony Walkman, like playing Enter Sandman, like having to stop my bike to hit shuffle or replay, I guess you'd call it. Love Metallica. And then really through studying music formally is where my mind really opened up, and I got into bass players like James Jamerson from Motown. And of course, you can't be a bass player without knowing who Jaco Pastorius is. Please look up Jaco. He is the bass player's bass player. He's the Jimi Hendrix, another big influence, but he's the Jimi Hendrix of bass.
There's a lot of documentaries on Jaco now, isn't there?
There's one particular one, with Robert Trujillo from Metallica. There's a lot of podcasts and stuff about that, but
I must have gotten confused with how many podcasts of that I listened to.
Talk about Jaco all day. I mean, I fake my Jaco impersonation, but he played funk like Tower of Power has funk. Rocco Prestia, there's another bass player, but he played funk like that. He could solo like Jimi Hendrix and John Coltrane. I mean, Jaco is a towering influence for all bass players, and through there I got into like the fusion stuff. Some of you may not be familiar with like Weather Report and Stanley Clarke. These are like the bass players you listen to in fusion, and that got me into the jazz world. And I really love John Coltrane. Like I remember the first time I heard like him solo on My Favorite Things, the old standard song, just like hearing somebody without being a singer improvise, and like it hits you. It's like, to him, it's like David Gilmour's guitar playing Pink Floyd. You can sing those solos. They're part of the song. It spoke to me emotionally on an emotional level, and you hear a human being expressing himself through a musical instrument, and the instrument ceases to be relevant at that point. It's just a vessel for a person's spirit to come out. Not to sound too mushy about it, but yeah. So those are just some of the influences. Like, I mean, it's I know I'm not limited by time on a podcast, but it's a lot. I mean, I got an Apple Music subscription, and have gone nuts just like listening to more music and getting hip to, as my teacher Joe would say, getting hip to a ton of different players.
And you've got a great ear, because I remember in years past, before a song would really hit, you'd say this one is going to be big, whether it was CeeLo Green's
Forget You
radio-friendly song, and Hey Ya by Andre 3000.
Outkast, yeah.
Outkast.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And I remember you called those right before they made it huge.
Cool.
And I think I have a good ear too. I've never really created anything unless we worked on like the roundtable team together. Yeah, you were
part of that, man. You gave me great production points, you know? You did.
A lot of it comes to me in dreams or just out of nowhere from the ether. I had to edit a lot of those songs for the Ring of Honor stuff I would do, like the welcome videos, like Personal Jesus. I need to cut this down to like 30 seconds, but you want to hear the essential parts in it.
Yeah.
And getting in the nitty gritty in audio editing, I've taken some audio classes and stuff. I don't think people appreciate it as much as what they see per se, at least when it's a visual thing, whether they're listening.
What do you mean? Explain.
Cutting down a song. You still want to keep the characteristics of the intro, the chorus, and the outro and things like that. Yeah. But you have to cut it down, but it has to flow really well. That takes some doing, and I think I have a good ear for that.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. I mean, you've been editing for a long time. Do you like that process, or do you despise it?
No, it can be fun.
Video too?
Less so, because that's more complicated. I think audio is a lot easier.
So so it's interesting. So you're kind of a person. By the way, I consider myself a visual person, not an auditory person.
But music is visual. People don't really think about that.
It is.
Like, how often do we joke like this song needs to sound more orange or something like that? You
Absolutely.
know what I
No.
mean?
Well, and people don't want to learn music theory because they think it's going to somehow mess with their muse. I think a lot of those people are just being lazy and they're not taking the time. They just want to jam out, but they don't want to like sit down and learn their scales and their chords and stuff. And that's cool. You don't have to do that stuff to make great music. Most of the great music in the world wasn't written by people who could read or write music. But it's a tool. It's a skill. Why would you not want to have more stuff at your disposal? But once you learn it, you kind of subconsciously have it and you bring it out. Like when I improvise, I really don't think about it. I know like my intervals and I have a pretty good ear. So I know what I can use, but I'm looking for colors. I have a great drummer friend who he was talking about playing the drum kit and thinking about how the drum kit is like sounds. Not so much. So this is a door knocking, and this is people walking into a room, and this is an elephant. I think that's more musical. But you arrive at that when you learn your instrument inside and out, and you have a lot of influences and experience and wisdom from playing. And there's always going to be virtuosos or freakish people who just come out of the woodwork and can do anything and play anything, like a Prince, like Prince is. But I think music is a visual art form. With, like we were talking about wrestling. I mean, you associate the rock with, and his song with all of those motions. You can't not disassociate those things.
Like Michael Jackson with his music videos. You imagine this particular move on this particular cue. And I don't want to say trivialize, but I don't mean to lessen the impact of what it means visually by putting it on a dance routine in a Pepsi commercial. I'm talking about stuff like what you were saying with visualizing. Nicholas Brandt, who's a photographer, directed the Stranger in Moscow music video, which is beautiful. The whole thing is black and white with rain. I can't separate that from the song. The song sounds like it's black and white. It sounds like it would be an overcast day.
But here's what's really great about music. I mean, we live in this world where since the advent of recording, everybody, there's like the definitive version of a song, and people kind of can't get away from that. And obviously music video kind of doubles down on that, because now you have the definitive version with the definitive imagery. But with the live performance, which is the best thing in the world, especially when the bands are tight and together, which I hope I was last night with my band. But
you were.
Thank you. The idea was I fished for that compliment. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But I was going to say, and you keep that in.
Yeah. When I said you were good before we started recording, that wasn't enough. You have to get it on the record.
Let's let everybody know here. It has been corroborated. I lost my train of thought a bit. But the idea that things evolve. And I remember watching This Is It. With you, I think we went to see it in the theater. It was probably like your 8th time or something. And because Eric could tell you who the director of photography was and what happened in the 6th frame. When it's Michael Jackson, he knows it. But not that he doesn't know other things, but he particularly knows Michael Jackson stuff. How they reimagined that was like it was like the WrestleMania or the Super Bowl of Michael Jackson. You had all these new videos and these new arrangements. And I remember Alex Al, who was this tremendous bass player who would have played on that, man. I wish that had happened. But we have This Is It as a memory. Alex Al, who was doing kind of the Louis Johnson, who was one of the great bass players, and you all know it, you just don't know his name, who played on like tons of stuff. Greg Fillinganes too, who played left-hand synth bass keys on the Michael Jackson. Those are the unsung heroes of Michael's career. Look those guys up. But Alex Al was playing live for that potential tour, or that potential, it was going to be at the O2 Arena. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he had used a fretless bass on some tunes with an octave effect, which is a Guy Pratt, Pino Palladino is another bass influence. I'm just name dropping. That's a sound that you used on a lot of Michael's recordings, the fretless bass with an octave divider for this really cool. To me, it sounds like just a whale or an elephant like speaking. Mm-hmm. And I remember how he kind of did his own thing, and it reimagined some of those songs. So I had like the definitive version of like Smooth Criminal, right, or Earth Song, that song, wow. And then there's the version that Alex Al and that band played on. But what's cool was like the Earth Song in particular, they had a whole new imagery for it that was like really like disturbing and sad but inspiring at the same time. And it hit me. I was like, man, this song, I always love this song, but it's like this whole new epic emotional drama for me now and
it was meant to.
Yeah, I mean, it took on a whole new life, and that happens also when people cover songs. Mm-hmm. Respect, I think, was Otis Redding's song, and then Aretha Franklin. Otis Redding. That is like the definitive song for ladies singing about the guys that break their hearts, or that they're winning. They're gonna win despite the bad relationship. But it was a guy. It was an Otis Redding tune. Along the Watchtower. That's one. Bob Dylan. Then there's the Jimi Hendrix. So things can be reimagined and evolved if we don't get too wrapped up in being like, no, this is the perfect version of it. We tend to do that a lot. People in our society want to have like the one, they want the instant gratification and the one definitive version of the thing they like, and they don't open their mind or they go too far and they just become, they like one band, like my uncle one of my uncles loves the Grateful Dead, which is cool. And a lot of the Grateful Dead fans, they like just the Grateful Dead, which is cool. Grateful Dead is a great band. They're Deadheads, you know. But sometimes you want to play other stuff, or or Fish is another band like that, and they're great bands. You know, they've written great songs like "Touch of Grey" by the Grateful Dead. I know it's a pop song, but man, what a great inspiring song that is. And Jerry Garcia is a great guitar player, but people. They might get stuck and just they're comfortable with the thing they like, and then they don't want to kind of expand beyond it sometimes, you know.
Well, you expanded when you
Thank you.
when you started doing your own album.
Yeah.
And that was somewhat of a process. It took a little bit of doing. So tell us about the process, how long it took, what your inspirations were, how you created it, because it's available now.
Yeah. My insecurity probably cost me 4 years with that, but it's called Anxiety Log. I'll plug it. I should plug it. And Anxiety Log. And it's under Lawrence Haber. My Instagram is Lawrence Haber Music. I'm not on Facebook yet. Eric wants me to be on there.
It doesn't matter to me at this point.
Yeah, whatever. At this point, right? But I'm on here pitching it. So it's on CD Baby. It's on iTunes and Spotify and Google Play and all that stuff. Amazon. Lawrence Haber Anxiety Log. Look it up. And so the idea really was I had actually... I was going through a difficult time with my musical identity. Identity is a terrible thing. Don't get wrapped up in it. I never wrote songs. I played bass on other people's stuff, original music.
Well, you wrote the Prism songs, didn't you?
I mean, we all kind of co-wrote that stuff, I guess. Maybe if there's a hit, we'll have to sort that out. Somebody discovers it, and then Justin Bieber covers a Prism song or something. But I never wrote. And I feel like I could do a lot of stuff. I play guitar, I play bass, I sing a little bit, and I play a little drums, a little piano. And I figure, you know what? We're in this age where everybody's doing this. I should give this a shot. And with the advent of digital recording, you can have GarageBand on your iPhone now. Which you can then put into the cloud and then open it up on your desktop, digital workstation and fix it up or whatever. I said, I'm going to take a shot. And so I wrote a couple of songs. And it ended up being I'm going to do an album. So I made really an EP, 7, I think, what is it, 6 songs? I don't even, 6 songs. Thanks, Eric. And I wanted to showcase a little bit of my bass playing stuff, which now it's, to me, it's now I a year later that I've released it, I'm I would do that. I wouldn't do that. I would do that totally differently, which is how all, I guess, kind of artistic people think. But I tried to get a little bit of all of my characters on there. I wish I got a little more, do the little upright bass thing on there too, because I play a lot of upright bass now, double bass. And, but yeah, there's some funk on there. There's some rock. There's a lot of Pink Floyd, whatever you like, whatever you want to say it sounds like. Yeah, the influence is there. There's a song on there that people seem to like a lot called Ritual, which is, I was going for a Lenny Kravitz-y Prince kind of thing. It's kind of a rock song with a nice groove to it.
Sweet Relief was my favorite, I believe.
Oh, really? Cool. That's very Pink Floyd, I think. It's got kind of a psychedelic rock thing. But, to be truthful, a lot of it is called Anxiety Log because it's how I cope with having some anxiety from time to time. And the songs are about that process and going through that and coming out the other side. I guess if you listen to it and read the song titles, there's the opening couple of songs are being kind of stuck in a holding pattern, and then Ritual is kind of breaking free from that, and then the last song, which is a little guitar piece I wrote called oh my God, what was it? We Are Simple, is about that idea of being, we are kind of simple organisms. We overcomplicate things. And that's the catharsis, I think, where I come out of it and I'm just cool with everything and I'm just kind of improvising and playing.
Well, I hope people check it out. How's the reception been so far?
It's been really good. I mean, to criticize myself, I haven't promoted it as much, maybe because I'm afraid of what people are going to think or something, which is terrible. I'm promoting it here. But the people who've listened to it, it's amazing. You think they're going to like one song and they like another, but people, they like the production. They like the my friend Cart helped me master it.
Your wife sang on it too?
Oh yes, that's very important. She always says I don't shout around enough. Melissa Criscolo, she's a great singer, very soulful, and she gave me not just singing. She did a lot of production. She helped a lot with producing it and giving me ideas. And giving me pointers on how to play certain things and what to take out. That's so important to be reductive in any artistic endeavor, knowing when to edit yourself. You've got to be willing to give stuff up for the greater good of the project. And she gave me a lot of good pointers and good tips. So she's on it, and she sings on a couple tracks and does a lot of harmonies and stuff. So I just hope people, honestly, listen to it. It's great if you can buy it. That's great. put some money in the pocket, but at the same time, just hearing it, giving it a chance. I know people aren't going to like everything on there, or might not like anything on there.
Don't sell us too hard, Lawrence.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is terrible. But please, give it a chance. Music is such a commodity now in our society, and people just take what they want and they get rid of the rest. And albums are rare. It's all about singles and everything. But give it a chance. It's a half hour of your time. Throw it on your commute after this podcast. Maybe you'll dig it. And, tell other people, hey, check out Lawrence from the Wrestling Roundtable. He put out an album of original music. And that's all I ask for. I would appreciate that.
Could we see any more original music going forward?
I think, yeah. I think, I did last year a project with a gentleman by the name of Bob Steeler, who was the drummer for a band called Hot Tuna back in the day. They're an offshoot of the Jefferson Airplane, and Bob is a great session drummer. And me, him, and this great guitar player from the area named Daniel Trent put a trio together, and we wrote some stuff, and we have it out called Steeler and the Law. And so maybe like a lot of that, I want to work with other people a lot. It's more fun, I think, to collaborate than to be stuck in a room myself, kind of laboring over my own neuroses. And but I think in the future it'll be more like individual things, like a song or two here and there. I don't know about doing the whole album thing again anytime soon, because it's a lot. When you say album, it's like making a movie as opposed to a short or a trailer or whatever.
And you did play bass on some transcendental type song that's on iTunes?
A beautiful album called Turia, Turiya, Turia. Again, my friend Kartikea, and a wonderful percussion drummer guy named Vincent Smith, I believe. And they had this beautiful like kind of music. I don't want to like trivialize it, but it's like kind of music used in yoga studios, very relaxing music.
I dig that stuff.
Oh, I dig it too. Cart had asked me to play a very brief bass solo at the end of the first tune called Ebb and Flow. So that was a cool little recording credit. More importantly, a good opportunity to collaborate with some great musicians.
And where can we find out more about Funk.5?
We're on Facebook. It's a cover band thing, so it's for parties and stuff. With this band, with the cover band, I like having fun. A lot of the bands I've been in are great, but sometimes people are like, they have to play the songs exactly as they go, and they're not really room for improvising or jamming or reacting to a crowd. So this band's a little bit more about having the opportunity to enjoy the people that are in the room with you, and if they're liking the songs, you kind of keep with that vibe. And if they're not, if they're not into a certain genre, you can go away from the plan a little bit and just make music for the people that are there, and not make it all about yourself. I mean, music, just like movies and TV, is all about, look at me, I made something.
That's what this show is.
That's what it is. But this particular band, if you're gonna have a party in the Greater Jersey area, check us out. Funk.5. My wife Melissa sings, and Dan, who I mentioned, plays guitar. And it's a cover band, but we're good. I think we're pretty good. We bring it. We bring the funk. We bring the power. It's one of the few cover bands where we get a bass solo, in there, and we like to stretch stuff and improvise and just have a good time.
You and I tend to talk basically weekly on the phone. We talk for like an hour at a time or whatever. We're taking that and we're putting it on the internet right now for people to download.
Yeah.
I Love You Like a Brother.
Likewise. Thank you.
Hope you come back. It was great.
Eric, you're the man. Everybody, please subscribe, please, to Eric's podcast. It's awesome. Thank you for having me.
Howdy, folks. Someone else who plays a guitar just like me. Lawrence has done a lot of stuff over the years, and he's got a lot of projects right now. You want to hear Lawrence play live? Well, you can. If you need music for an event in the New York metropolitan area, that's New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or Connecticut, check out Lawrence's band, Funk.5. Available for weddings, parties, clubs, restaurants, barbecues, business events, any gathering. Find Funk.5 on Facebook and YouTube. Email funkpoint5@gmail.com. That's FUNKPOINT, 5 @gmail.com for availability. If you've listened to the music at the end of every podcast for the past month, then you've heard the tracks from Lawrence's album of original music, Anxiety Log, featuring Melissa Criscolo. And if you haven't, then you can find it on iTunes, Google Play, CD Baby, Spotify, Amazon, and other digital platforms. Just search Lawrence Haber or Anxiety Log. Lawrence wrote, produced, and played everything on the album, so I hope you enjoy it as I have. Lawrence also posts fun content from his gigs, recording sessions, as well as performance and instructional content on his Instagram at Lawrence Haber Music. He just launched his YouTube channel, which will feature his unique approach to music instruction as well as performances. Search for Lawrence Haber Music on YouTube. You can subscribe, like, and comment from there. And lastly, Lawrence is a freelance bass player on electric and upright bass. He's available for live gigs, recording, and instruction. You can send an inquiry to lawrencehabermusic@gmail.com. Next week, I'll be talking with a musician that Lawrence played with in the band Fireside Chat, our longtime friend, Michael Jehoda. We'll be talking about his music, goofing off in high school with our buddy Rodney from the Wrestling Roundtable, working on a movie together with Jamie Kennedy, and more. So until next week, hold tight, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, subscribe on iTunes and SoundCloud. And sending us home is the song Bird Bath from Anxiety Log featuring Melissa Criscolo. Until next week, stay cool, everybody.
Sky next to a ring cloud.
Well, we're on now. Is it on? Am I on? Has this thing been recording the whole time?
Oh, we're starting?
We're starting?
Welcome to the Fun Nerdist podcast.
Going to talk about the cats.
My cats. They help with my depression.